하나 빼기 가위바위보.
I think it was one of my favorite scenes of the entire series.
Oh, lovely. Good. I've learned so much about you now. It doesn't matter if you go to zero or if you literally own the world. All of these characters are kind of fundamentally wrestling with the same problem. Initially, when I watched this, I didn't like that part of the scene.
But then this happens.
Okay, I am having less and less justification to not like that decision. I need to use this term very carefully because of my profession. In a system that dehumanizes and breaks people, it's either all or it's nothing.
심리학과 영상 차트키 스토리텔링의 규칙점에서
Boy, we're gonna lose some subscribers.
we're gonna piss off everybody.
Welcome to Frame of Mind, where psychology and filmmaking meet at the intersection of storytelling. My name's Curtis. I'm a psychotherapist.
And my name is Jordan. I'm a video editor. And for those of you in our audience who speak Korean, 심리학과 영상 차트키 스토리텔링의 규칙점에서 만나는 것인 Frame of Mind에 다시 오신 여러분을 환영합니다. 저는 영상 편집자 조단이고 심리치료사인 조형 Curtis입니다.
Is it ironic that I had a thought of like, man, I really wish I had learned some Korean for this episode.
You know what? I thought that you might do it. And so I was like, I have to do it. I have to do it now, just in case. To those of you in our audience who do actually speak fluent Korean, please let me know in the comments how much of that was actually understandable. Maybe a score out of 10. 10 out of 10, I sounded like an actor from Squid Games. And 1 out of 10 being, you now want to put me in the Squid Games for how badly I butchered your beautiful language. The reason why I wanted to do this is partially just because it'd be cool. But the other piece is that we're probably going to get a bit of an influx of Korean-speaking audiences. And if you're watching this episode, you probably speak English, otherwise you're not going to be able to enjoy it very much. So this is just a way to say thank you for giving us your time. And the fact that you can understand us and you also speak fluent Korean means you've done twice as much work as either of us. So try to do the intro in Korean out of respect for the show, out of respect for you guys, and just to say, yeah, welcome here.
What a guy.
So I think probably a good place to start is what you and I have been obsessed about talking with media lately, which is what does the start of a TV show, of a movie, say about the entirety of what's going to follow it? We've seen that a lot of great pieces of media do this thing where they tell you the story in a small little encapsulated moment, and that's going to help you latch on to the bigger story that's probably a little bit more complicated and fleshed out through the entire series, through the entire movie. So the first 5 minutes or the first episode might actually foreshadow a lot about what's to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where we've seen a lot of, like you said, those great films doing that. So I'm curious because are you talking about season 2, the first episode, or season 1, the first episode?
Both, actually.
우리 동네에선 그 노래를 오징어라고 불렀다. 마치 오징어를 닮은 그림 때문에 붙은 이름이었다.
I'm curious what you want to lay out because there's only one thing that I think really stood out to me, but it stood out to me more so than I think the first time I watched this.
Yeah, I think the benefit of hindsight is huge when it comes to kind of going back and seeing what themes people are trying to lay out. Because
100%.
On its face, well, the first time you see this, it's like it's a game.
They're literally just explaining the game.
Yeah, this is why the series is called Squid Game. They're gonna play the Squid Game.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll start with the things that are like more, ooh, look, pretty thing.
Yeah.
From a color grading standpoint, because they probably didn't shoot this in black and white. They're telling you that this is separate from the rest of the series.
The visual language of film says this happened before the series occurred, insinuating old automatically.
Exactly. Gi-hun's the one narrating. It might be him as the kid, but that doesn't really matter as much as the fact that this is laying out the themes, which is what I see is that introducing of divisions, shapes, and upward mobility. The division is like you're set into 2 teams. One team is on the defense, one team is on the offense, one team has an advantage, one team has a disadvantage.
Yep.
규칙은 간단하다. 아이들은 무리를 지어 공격과 수비 두 편으로 나뉜다.
The other piece is the idea that you're trying to go from one stage to another stage. And the way that they show it on the squid, you're going from the bottom to the top. And that's the whole idea of what's going to be going on through the rest of the show is these are people who are starting economically at the very bottom. And what they're trying to do is get to the top. And they're doing so at the risk of their life. If you don't make it, you die.
이때 수비자에 밀려 선을 밟거나 밖으로 나가면 죽는다.
And there are people who are going to be in their way.
Yeah.
I never thought about that before.
And it's
That's brilliant.
combative.
Yeah.
We can't all win.
Yep.
Maybe the multiple people on your team can win, but there has to be a loser. It's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is just, it's a nice way to introduce the fact that like, hey, the triangles, squares, and circles aren't just like meaningless symbols. They also have to do with the original game, which is a real kids game apparently in Korea.
Yeah.
And it also has to do with this idea of segregating people into groups.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff going on, but let me know some of your
That's
thoughts.
brilliant. I love all that stuff. The thing that stood out to me this time around watching it was just the last line. I felt exhilarated. It's as if I owned the entire world.
Yeah.
그 순간 나는 세상을 다 가진 것처럼 행복했었다.
And that idea of like the feeling that comes there, but then the separation that's going to occur both for Gi-hun and for Il-nam, where they kind of end up on opposite sides of the spectrum, where one has no money, one has all the money, one doesn't own the world, one literally owns the world. But both of those characters lose connection with that feeling. Like they don't have the exhilaration. They don't have any of that. And it's interesting how, did you realize that maybe this is a critique of capitalism, this whole show?
And welcome back, everybody, to We're Gonna Piss Off Everybody. Let's talk about the things that nobody gets upset about, politics and religion.
Oh, beautiful.
We touched on religion last time. Let's
Yep.
talk on politics
Yep.
today.
Like with all things, we'll try to be gracious about the way that we go about it. But I
Yeah.
think one of the things that really stands out to me, these characters are all trying to recreate this experience and this feeling.
I knew you were going to bring some psychological lens to it. I didn't even catch that, but okay, go for it.
But it's interesting to me how the way that it seems to be working or how it's demonstrated in the show, it doesn't matter which extreme you end up on. If you end up on either extreme, you lose connection with the feeling. Like it doesn't matter if you go to zero or if you literally own the world. All of these characters are kind of fundamentally wrestling with the same problem. What is meaningful?
Whoa, that's actually, that's a great point because money isn't meaningless. You need it, but also how much does that come at the cost of the people around you?
Yeah, and there's going to be tons of themes around that, but it feels like the relationship to money is going to be interesting to explore.
Yeah.
And I think both sets of characters are going to have an interesting relationship to it because on the one hand, if you have zero money, you are in a physical crisis. But then on the other hand, when you have all of the money, you end up in an existential crisis.
Ooh.
But just as like this initial piece, really cool to see how they introduce that and all these themes that show up that you might not catch on a first watch.
Totally. It's also kind of interesting that it's set up as one person achieves an elevated advantage because they did something. So you ran through the game, you succeeded, and now you have an advantage.
Yeah.
That's almost in a sense prepping us for, in this season 1, episode 1, very first minute of the show, prepping us for season 2, which is Gi-hun won the game. Now he's got both feet and he can go through the game again with both feet. And he's got an advantage.
Great point.
And it's sort of, the visual imagery is sort of like bringing these other people around you. It's sort of this uprising. And so it's interesting to see, maybe it was planned this detailed from the start or not, but those themes are consistent all the way through to season 2.
And it's also true for both Il-nam and the frontman.
Yeah.
Who both also have that kind of advantage that they have over the other people in the game.
Oh, that's so true. It's kind of interesting to see how we talked about how money comes at the expense of the people around you.
That's right.
That's the very first character conflict that we see, is the idea that Gi-hun is extorting and using his own mom for money.
Yeah.
Like
and
she's meaningless compared to the money that he can extract out of her.
And it's this zero-sum game thing again, too. It's like, I have to take it from this person, and it's from this person that I potentially have a relationship with, I care about. Like, for me to gain, you have to lose.
Totally. From a symbolic, from a foreshadowing perspective.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
Like the very first thing that he does is he gambles and he wins.
Yeah. And how much won did he win? Oh. Did you notice 4,500,060?
You're going to be player 4, 5, 6. That's a good point.
But again, like these little pieces that kind of show you, again, like I think you said it at one point before, it's like, it's the filmmakers showing off.
Yeah.
They could have done whatever number they wanted, but like, hey, little thing if you're paying attention.
Yeah. It's something that it's not going to make or break the story, But the fact that those things exist is showcasing they care so much to put those little details in. So the rest of the story is probably going to be good as a result.
The evidence of the leather work is in the stitching.
Ooh,
that's the quality that you see.
That's a great line. You're full of great lines.
I try my best.
Yeah, but that's an interesting piece that the first thing he does is gambles and wins.
Yeah.
And that's relevant because he's going to gamble his life and he's going to win the whole thing.
That's a great point.
He wins the Squid Game. But the thing that's interesting about this is that here in this first scene, he wins, but at what cost? Because it's not really meaningful. It ends up not actually being what he thought it was. There's other strings attached to it. And same thing goes when he wins the game. It's like, great, but I had to murder a bunch of people. But I also don't have connection with the people around me. But I also see the fact that like the system is still broken. Like this doesn't change anything. I won. And nothing is different.
Yep. Cool too. Now the racing scene, I'm just thinking about when he gets caught by the loan sharks in the bathroom and he has to sign a contract.
Yeah.
Very similar to then when they're at the games. And like there's this illusion of, actually maybe that's a really good way to talk about it because it's one of the things that we'll maybe bring up later on. But
the illusion of choice.
Yeah. Well, the illusion of choice and how is it really true that if you like, well, you know what you were doing, you signed a contract under duress. Do you truly have freedom of choice? And it's an interesting question that I think this show poses of under the system of capitalism as it currently stands with its particular flaws and challenges and loopholes. Is there true freedom of choice and participation when it feels like many people are under duress within the system?
전부 다요?
Oh, well, this is a brilliant scene. I'm not super familiar with this director, but the way that this scene is shot feels very Wes Anderson.
You know why? It's because of the music.
Right, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like that
It's
pairing.
so true.
And then like the locked off still shots.
Yeah. The very symmetrical, flat sort of framing. It's weird because I actually noticed, it's weird that you mentioned that because I actually noticed exactly I think it's true what you're saying, but I also noticed exactly the opposite where there's a lot of optical zooms. There's a lot of times when you'll see the camera lens like not just push in, but actually zoom in.
Okay.
And that's an important distinction because with we call it a dolly in or a push in, what you're doing is you're physically moving the camera through 3D space closer to the object.
Yeah.
What that does is that gives you perspective. But if you optically zoom something, what that does is that there's typically a rule where in filmmaking, you don't want to optically zoom unless you're doing one of two things. It's either you want to make somebody feel unnerved or you want to make them feel like they're being watched.
Oh, interesting.
Because what it does is it breaks the fourth wall and reminds your brain that this is a camera that you're looking through.
Right.
And so what that does is it's interesting. That's a great choice because
this guy is being watched right now.
Yeah, for this scene specifically, because what they're doing is they're doing surveillance on this guy.
Yeah.
But also the entire show is a little bit about that.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting that you bring up the fact that it felt like a Wes Anderson film because he uses a bunch of those crash zooms and stuff as well every so often. Not necessarily to the same degree, but it's a very stylistic approach. And it's interesting to see how somebody sort of weaves in and out of seemingly contradictory emotions and frameworks through their filmmaking, feeling unnerving and sort of like you're being watched and a little bit of like a thriller horror vibe.
Yep.
And then you throw Wes Anderson in there.
Yep.
It's like that takes a lot of skill as a filmmaker to put those seemingly incongruent puzzle pieces together in a way that really feels like it works.
Yeah, there's a term for this I was actually thinking about because it was something that struck me, again, when you're talking about like something that shows up in the show a lot. I think about in season 2, the merry-go-round scene.
Yes.
And the idea of when they're in that particular game, the song that's being played. If you put that outside of that context, it's a lovely song. You drive by a school in Korea, and if they're playing that, you're like, oh, how sweet. That's lovely that the kids are playing and doing whatever. But there's something about pairing it with that context that gives you that unnerving feeling. And
100%.
I think the term for it is called defamiliarization.
Ooh, interesting.
So it's this idea of like, when you place something in a new context, you take away your experience of it, and therefore it becomes something new and novel. And your brain is now struggling to like wrap its head around what exactly is this doing here. It's kind of, I wasn't able to find it. I wish there was some particular phrase for it, but it's like I think the trope is the music box in a horror film.
Yes.
Like that thing that kind of goes slightly off kilter and a little bit like, it's a cute thing that makes you uncomfortable.
The uncanny valley auditorily.
Yeah. Like all of the contrast and the context that doesn't feel like it fits is great for creating the tone to the show that you want the audience to experience.
Yes.
You want them to feel uncomfortable. And so you have to use these tools that would make them uncomfortable that really are things you want to specifically apply in certain circumstances. It's not a tool that you want to use broadly across all shows all the time.
Totally.
Right. So it's cool to see them using this when it comes to like music in the activity, or the way that this guy looks so nice while he's doing such horrible things, or pairing kids games with murder. Like that constant contrasting of things that appear one way and things that have a very different meaning underneath. It really generates that atmosphere in the whole show.
Yeah, they do that everywhere. Like even something as simple as the color contrast that we've got going on here a little bit. It's like you've got neon green and pink.
Yep.
Like these are not dystopian, authoritarian murder game colors that you would normally associate with things.
Yeah, it's not like Hunger Games where everything is like grayscale and like, can you imagine Michael Myers wearing like pink and baby blue pastels? It's like that level of, oh, this is weird. This is off. This is creepy.
Sorry, I thought you meant like the comedian, like like Austin Powers.
So 100%. But
I was like, yes, that's what.
But that's the thing, I guess, right? Because like it's funny that even I use that example and you thought about it that way. Because in one context, yeah, it totally makes sense. What are you talking about? That's not weird at all. If he's Austin Powers, he would use it. He would wear an outfit like that. But Michael Myers, the serial killer, that's then this more like Squid Games-esque contrast.
Totally. I think on the one hand, the contrast is doing exactly what you're saying it does. I think on the other hand, I think Squid Game is popular because it's great. So I'm not saying that this is the only reason, but I think a big reason about why it wasn't just a great series, but was able to gain international acclaim is because its themes are simultaneously complex and stupid simple.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to deconstruct authoritarianism and capitalism and like monetary structure and the economy. And we're going to do it through the lens of red light, green light.
Yeah.
The most complex things. And you're using the most simple things in order to bring that about.
Yep.
Simple shapes, circle, square, triangle, simple colors, really easy to contrast.
Yep.
People are going to make the choice of like, do we want to continue the game or do we want to stop the game? There's so much of the show that's just, is it this or is it this?
Yeah.
But within that structure that your brain's immediately able to grasp is all of these layers of amazing complexity.
Yeah.
And if you don't speak Korean and if you had the subtitles off, you'd still get the surface level themes of what's happening. And so all the time that you spend on the subtitles reading now is so much easier because your brain's so easily able to pick up on these baseline themes.
Yep.
Now that I understand this, me reading this makes so much more sense.
Yeah. They've done a great job of making sure that they take all those complex themes and they have condensed them. They have not dumbed them down.
Yes.
It's like, it's not a simplification of something complex. It is a containing of something complex in something simple. Not only is Squid Game so popular, but I'm glad it's popular because it gets people potentially, if they're willing to engage with it, like wrestle with some really important questions. Because all the things that you see presented here are things you can extrapolate to our more complex real world. But the themes, the ideas, the motivations, all that stuff still applies. And so it's a nice way to experiment thinking about, well, what does this mean for me? What do I get away from this? What do I take from this? What questions am I now left with when I enter my own world and maybe see some similarities in the things that I've seen out here?
선물은 하나. 빵과 복권.
So this scene, I thought, was a really good microcosm of the entire series as a whole.
Right.
So like the context of this is he buys a bunch of bread, he buys a bunch of lottery tickets, he goes to the most down and out people and he offers them a choice. Do you have the bread or do you have the lottery ticket?
Yeah.
And it's this little example of like, do you have the thing that you need versus the thing that can get you out of your situation? Is it your baseline necessities or is it hope for your future?
Take care of today or take care of everything.
Yeah.
It's cool too, because when you think about highlighting this scene in the first episode, it does feel like this is like the reintroduction to either a old audience or the new audience of some of those themes from season 1, but in a very different way.
Yeah.
I do like too how, because when I was looking at some reviews, I think some people were talking about how they're kind of annoyed at how much voting they did and felt like it dragged on.
Yeah.
I don't know if I necessarily agree. And I do like the fact that because there's going to be a lot more voting experiences in the second season, like in a lot of ways, this binary choice is a really nice way to introduce these things, because you're going to see this motif of a choice between A and B. I even like how like he's got his hands like this. It almost to me looks like a mirror of when people are going to hit the buttons with their hands.
And you also see the homeless guy. You could see his hand in the frame.
Like
they do a lot of times.
And
in
so
those
it's
shots.
like the motif is the same, the framing of the shot is the same, and it's like, what a lovely way to subconsciously get your viewers used to what they're going to start to be seeing for the rest of this show.
Totally.
And I think a lot of the ways it's like this initial scene asks the question, and then all the voting scenes going forward from here are like when people are like the banter and when people are going back and forth, it's people beginning to explore, what does this mean?
Right.
Like here you see the choice that they're making, but now you get to see people's process as they vote of like, why would I make this choice versus this choice? How do I go from one to the other? Why do people decide to change one versus the other? You ask the question, and then instead of answering it, you explore it.
Episode 1 of season 1 did this really well, where it laid out the themes of the show and what's going to happen. It did foreshadowing. This is also doing the exact same thing, but I would argue in additional layers.
Yeah.
Because what you have, hello, Mr. Buddy. Because you have the introduction of the themes of what's happening. Like, do you have the bread or do you have the lottery ticket? Do you take your life or do you try to get more money?
Yep.
Like that's a direct comparison. But you also have this foreshadowing of somebody from the games entering into the games. Because this is the stage where the recruiter is going to actually start playing the games with Gi-hun at the very end of the episode.
Right.
And so you have this scene establishing the core themes. You have the Russian roulette, rock, paper, scissors, where it's establishing that you're going to be pitting people against each other and there's going to be self-sacrifice taking place later on in the show. And then you have the idea about the front man is actually going to be stepping into the game themselves at their own risk, playing the games authentically, quote unquote. We'll see. But this scene works on its own just as it is, but it also does the legwork of foreshadowing everything that's going to be happening on through season 2.
There's probably also something important to be looking at with the scene when it comes to the critique of capitalism, because I feel like there's a lot of elements in here where it really highlights that.
The bread versus lottery ticket.
So you think about like, it's interesting to see him talk about this, because when he's stomping on the bread, it's like he makes a couple of statements that are very interesting. So he says like, I didn't throw these away, you did.
이 빵을 버린 건 제가 아니라 선생님들입니다.
And yet he is the one stomping on the bread.
Yeah.
Right. And even the idea of like, I offered you a choice and people made the choice. The resources are still there. They're still around. There's no reason that you have to throw these away or stomp on them or destroy them, other than the fact that you are operating within a system that says it's zero sum. It's either this or either that. And I think it's kind of highlighted by one of the loan shark guys when they're watching him, who look at him stomping on all the bread and they say, what's wrong with him? Almost as like an expression towards if this guy is currently an embodiment of the current system of capitalism, that they're looking at him destroying all the resources for these people who could use it. And it's like, what is wrong with this? Why is this happening the way that it is? Right.
You mentioned before, it's like, is this a critique of capitalism? I'm not sure if you've seen the creator of the show who like explicitly says like he is critiquing capitalism.
Yeah.
Like it is.
It's one of the few ones where we've seen like the creator says, no, this is what I'm doing with the themes. This is the point of it.
Yeah. We're going to spell it out.
Okay. A couple of things. I'm going to have to go on a few different tangents here. The interesting thing that I've seen when I've been watching people review this show, specifically around its relationship to the critique of capitalism, is interesting to me because it seems like it really depends on what your political leanings are.
Mm-hmm.
And that will highly shape your interpretation of what this show is about.
Ooh, I might have some things to say about this, but keep going.
So I've seen from a lot of pieces of left-wing media, people saying, well, this is a critique of capitalism because capitalism is inherently bad. And then all these things that they kind of believe getting infused in there. And then I've seen from people who are more on the right-leaning side of things, potentially, or more pro-capitalism saying, well, this isn't as much a critique of capitalism as it is a critique of authoritarianism.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, well, authoritarianism, is that maybe really about communism? And I feel like one of the things to really be keeping in mind when you're looking at this is that when people are reviewing a show like this and they're talking about their interpretations of the themes, so much of this is actually going to be more of not what this show is truly about, but the show being a mirror for you about your own beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're looking at, well, what does this mean for me? It's not saying, what does the show mean? It's saying, what is the show bringing up from inside of me? And we've got to be really careful, I think, to not just look at the things that come up automatically for me, that I say, yes, this aligns with me. This is what I believe. This is what makes sense. But to also be waiting and be patient to get to some of those things that say, but what if I looked at it from the other person's perspective, or waited for some of the other themes that don't feel like they line up as much with what I believe?
Totally.
To see, is there something about this film that, just like the way that it's using framing and contrast to make me uncomfortable, is there something in the themes that might also be making me a little bit uncomfortable that I should also be grappling with?
So what I hear you saying is that regardless of whether you're on the left or the right, we want to piss you off.
Yes, because that's the point. Good media will upset you no matter what, because it's getting to the heart of human themes.
I think that's a great point, though, is that great media is a mirror.
Yeah.
Because it's not... Propaganda tells you what to think. Great media helps you to explore ideas.
Yeah.
You might get certain things, and that is A, maybe what the creator was intending, but B, it's great for you to be exploring those things.
Totally.
If something makes you uncomfortable, that's a signal to your brain that something needs to be thought through. There's something here that we need to address.
Yeah.
And regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, I think you're going to find things that unnerve you and rattle you, because I think I'll give you my personal interpretation. I think it's a critique of both, but I think it's a explicit critique of capitalism and an implicit critique of communism.
Ooh, interesting.
And so that whole idea of authoritarianism is like, well, yeah, because like both extremes are authoritarian. It's intentionally going after one, and I think it's either subtly or accidentally going after the other.
So is it possible then that if you attempt to critique one system of power, because hypothetically, the hypothesis would be all systems of power, regardless of their orientation or their leanings politically, utilize the same systemic structures to maintain control, that a critique of one system of power is a critique of all systems of power?
I would almost agree with that. I think an honest exploration allows for that opportunity. Because if it's just a piece of propaganda, it's like, well, left is right or right is right. It's like, that's not going to allow for multiple interpretations to be brought out of a piece of media. But if it's an honest exploration, if it's something that's proposing questions and wanting you as the audience to do some legwork to answer these questions for yourself, that's going to necessitate that people can interpret things different ways. Maybe this is a great time to bring up our Arrival episode, where a big piece of that film's interpretation was literal interpretations to a film can actually be negative or detrimental to the purpose of that piece of media. It's like the whole point is for you to wrestle through that set of questions for yourself. Because if you're just given an answer, like that's not yours. You're not embodying it. You haven't taken that on yourself. It's just like, I agree or I disagree. It's like, but if you actually wrestle through something, now regardless of what answer you choose, you've now taken ownership over that.
It makes me think then that because this does feel like an honest piece of media when it comes to being open-ended enough to let you explore things, it makes me think about one of the elements, whether it is capitalism or communism. One of the mechanisms of power and maintaining power is the idea of dehumanization. We are not treating these people who are homeless as humans, because if you were treating them like that, you would give them the bread.
Yeah.
Or both, right? Because like, oh, you're a person, here's your needs for today, and here's a chance to make something different, right?
Totally.
But we don't do that. We treat these human beings as things for our entertainment. They say it explicitly, but there's implicit symbolism too in the first season when they're on the glass bridge piece. It's interesting how the bibs they make them wear are so reminiscent of the bibs that the horses have to wear.
Yeah.
When they're first doing that initial scene in episode 1.
Well, that imagery comes up multiple times because when they go to the club in season 2, episode 2, right before Gi-hun gets kidnapped, they're wearing horse heads.
Yeah. And like how even there's numbers attached to them, like everything is trying to symbolize the dehumanization. And then even explicitly, they'll say, no, we're treating you like horses. Right.
Totally.
And there is a fascinating piece about dehumanization though, because to a degree, I think what the film is expressing, what I would 100% agree with, is that in order to dehumanize somebody else, you kind of have to dehumanize yourself.
Ooh.
Because it's not about dehumanizing another person, it's about detaching from humanity, which I think is beautifully symbolized because the VIPs are all also wearing animal masks.
Right.
They're just golden animal masks, but they're still animals, not people.
That's a great point, actually. It's like they're having to kind of shave out some of their humanity in order to treat people this way.
Exactly. And then the way that they are treating people, like all the servers or all the like human furniture, like literally treating a very stark symbol of dehumanization.
Yeah, as literal of an interpretation as you can get.
Exactly.
It's as on the nose as you can get.
Yeah.
Without actually, surprisingly, without being super on the nose about what it's saying.
Yeah. But it's like, it's stark.
Yeah.
And let's say specifically to be as nuanced as we possibly can be here, because this is the podcast of nuance.
Yep.
You're not going to get from us like this good, this bad, whatever. When we think about the critique of capitalism.
Also, by the way, we're Canadian. So if you have any like American political anger to like, we're not American. So just to get that out of the way.
Sorry, eh? Can't do it. If we look at what kind of specific critiques of capitalism they're looking at, instead of saying like capitalism is bad, let's say what is wrong with the current system. And I have a feeling that at least one of the big things that the show explores is that at least one of the flaws or errors with how capitalism is being constructed in today's modern society is the utility of dehumanization in the process. Any of this reducing people down to numbers or for their purposes of manufacturing or entertainment maybe is always going to have, you could even say maybe is always going to have at least an implicit bent towards dehumanization that we have to be very careful to have a counterbalance for.
Right. When you're bringing up the whole numbers piece, dehumanization, it's kind of interesting how there's that simultaneous critique of capitalism versus communism, where it's like, on the one hand, you don't have a name, you have a number. That's sort of a symbolic way to view the way people feel in capitalism. But you also have everybody's wearing a uniform, forced uniformity, which is kind of more of a communist critique. And so it's like, and then at the same time in season 1, you also had that one girl who came from North Korea.
Correct. Yeah.
And there was an explicit moment where there was a girl who's like, hey, like you came over from North Korea. And then she asks, so which do you prefer? Like, do you prefer being in North Korea or do you prefer being in the Squid Game?
북에선 왜 내려온 거야? 여기가 나은 줄 알고. 그래서 여기가 나?
Hey, neither of these are good.
Yeah.
North Korea's bad. Like, communism's not great, but it's also like, we got some problems here too.
100%.
Because we're in a literal death race for money. It's kind of ironic too. This is the tracksuit that I'm wearing is actually 067, which is actually the girl from North Korea.
Oh, look at that.
That's like, I didn't notice that. It's like, oh, 067. That's her.
Sick.
That's too funny. Everything feels like it's kind of shit.
Yep.
No matter what you choose, it's wrong. And part of what I wonder is this a little bit of an exploration about no matter what way you choose to organize human societies, you're always going to have this problem of shit's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And the problem is not necessarily like we didn't set things up in a good way. The problem or the solution is the human heart and the human condition. It's like, money's not bad. Like the prioritizing of money above people, that's bad. It's like equality isn't bad, but forced equality at gunpoint. There's that one scene where the doctor has insider information because he's working with the guards. And they execute him and like hoist him up. And it's like this is what happens when you have an unfair advantage. It's like, we don't like unfair advantages, but that's a pretty extreme result.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
Equality to the point of death.
And
neither of those
hypocritically.
Yeah.
We don't want equality, says the people in power.
Yeah, exactly.
There's almost like when you're talking about that, it makes me think about, should I solve the problem?
Yeah, go for it. Human society has existed for how many eons? Just please figure it out for us.
As an expert in the human mind and heart, no, please don't include that. That is the most pretentious thing that I could possibly say. I want to offer a potential idea about it, is a better way to put it. There's a piece when we're talking about these critiques and like the inherent flaws with however you organize a human society. I have a feeling, just from talking to people and where humans go wrong, I wonder if there's a parallel between the individual and then the societal levels, where there's maybe a reflection of where people go wrong individually is also the way that people go wrong in a society.
Oof.
And it's the idea of organizing anything by only utilizing a single lens of perspective. Like, people will talk about the economy and they'll talk about it from an economic perspective. But I get the feeling like when we're talking about, you have people who are the have-nots and the haves, and both of them at the extreme ends have problems within the system. I feel like is because on both ends, like, there's a middle ground where the economic perception works. What are the different zones of income that make a big difference? Anything up to like, you're getting up to 100,000 makes a big difference. But then there is a limitation at some point. In that zone, the economic lens is like, yeah, you get a little bit more and then you get this gain. But using the economic lens at some point has a diminishing level of returns. The more that you gain economically, the less that lens actually starts to solve your problems, which I think is where the dehumanization can kind of begin, is when these people who begin to become the haves do not have a flexible enough perspective of the world to drop the economic lens for something else.
Oh, you've achieved this much through this lens, and so why would you actually use anything else? It's
Exactly.
worked for you.
And so they just keep barreling forward. But then it's when we get to that question of, I have all the money in the world and I still don't feel anything. Something like Squid Games only occurs when you keep pushing forward through that same lens. Well, I'll use money to motivate people and I'll do this, and I'll still look at people as means of production and products. And like, that then lends to the dehumanization versus if they could pivot to something else of like, so if money isn't the thing that's going to make me happy, maybe are there other things that could make me happy? And it makes me think to the opening of the first season, where it's like, when did this person feel so exhilarated on top of the world? When they won, or when they had the freedom that they had as a child?
Ooh, great point. The happiest he ever was in that very first scene.
Before he ever made any money, but when he was not at the top of the economic hierarchy, but when he was actually outside of the economic hierarchy.
That's a great point.
And it makes me think that, like, you hear a lot of stuff about billionaires when they go on podcasts and stuff, and these people who are entrepreneurs seem to be people who are driven by these projects.
Yes.
Like, people will talk all the time about, like, I sold my company for $500 million and the next 3 months were the worst months of my life.
Yeah, because you had nothing to do.
I was miserable. I didn't have anything. And so it's like, it's this mode of pursuit. And oftentimes what they'll do is they'll solve by saying, I'll go make another company. I'll do this. I wonder, though, would people be better served by finding an alternative thing to put their energy into that isn't economically driven? They know how to build a business. Great. But maybe there's something else you can do with your time. Like, is there a different problem you can solve? Is there something about making connections with other human beings? Is there something else like creative and artistic and meaningful that you can do? There's more than one lens to look at the world through. But if you're only looking at it through one lens, predominantly or exclusively, I think we'll almost always end up distorting your perspective. And you'll start to lose track. And I think that's where a lot of the dehumanization will then begin to occur in this system, is people who aren't flexible enough to find different ways to engage with their life.
On the one hand, I think some people might be like, Oh, wait, like billionaires have problems? Boo-hoo, you want me to feel sorry for them? It's
Bro,
like,
the amount of people who I talk to who have not unlimited, but like more money than they need, and they say my life sucks.
yeah.
Man, there's nothing like being a therapist to have you realize that, yeah, actually money does not buy happiness. And that's actually maybe an interesting point to think about, because it's a conflict, because people will hear that from me and they'll say, but what about the other sides? And I think maybe the way to think about it would be, money can buy survival, but money cannot buy happiness.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling a lot of these people stay in a survival-based mindset.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, I need more, I need more, I need more. They never realize like, oh, it's sufficient, it's done. I crossed the surviving threshold, because the tool that you use to survive is not going to be the same tool that you use to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find something different.
Yeah. It's tough for people to feel like that's true. Like, wait, the more money you have, it doesn't actually solve your problems.
Yeah.
But in a weird way, I kind of went through something very similar recently, because
Ah.
a couple months ago, I quit my job.
That's right. Congratulations.
Woo!
Again, contrast, weird thing to think. What are you talking about? But
Yeah.
like in your situation,
It was a great job. It was the most amount of money that I've ever made. I'm not technically allowed to say my salary, but I'll say at least that I was making.
wait, were you for real?
Yeah.
Damn, bro.
But that brings up problems.
Yeah.
Because you stretch yourself, and then like
Yeah.
a mortgage, and then it's like, ugh. And then if like the price of housing goes down a little bit, you're like, oh, I feel the pain, I feel the stress.
Yeah,
And
you're
it's
still in
like,
that survival space.
yeah. But at the same time, it's like I quit that job, and I'm technically making no money right now. And I don't think I've been happier in a very long time.
Yeah.
And so it's weird to be like, money is a necessity to proceed through the world to a degree.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect to sleep this well, be this at peace, because the pressure wasn't there. And it's weird because it's like you've lost something that everybody thinks is so important. It's like, it's a status thing. It's a capability thing. Like it frees you up to do X, Y, and Z. But it's like, man, gosh, the freedom is priceless.
Thanks, MasterCard.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting how like
MasterCard, please sponsor us.
we need money.
I need money.
What a fascinating idea. I love that like lived experience that you have to kind of really drive home that point. It's reminding me of like talking to clients and a different system of power, like systems of expectation, and specifically expectations that are placed on us maybe by other people in our lives, by parents, by society, where it feels like, this is what you need to do. You should do this. You should do this. This is what happiness looks like. And something that people don't often realize, but it comes up so often in my practice, is like tons of people's psychological distress is actually caused by the fact that these expectations that they're living by aren't actually a good fit for them.
Right. Yeah.
And the idea of somebody would look at you like, bro, you get to make TikToks for 6 figures a year. Why aren't you happy? From the outside perspective, somebody would look at that and say, well, obviously, what's wrong with you?
Because TikTok is shit.
TikTok won't be sponsoring us.
No.
But like from your inside perspective, from being in it with your own life, you're like, this doesn't meet my needs. Maybe it did at the beginning.
Yeah.
When you first started for those first couple of years, maybe that did something that you required. But there's a certain point where once that need gets met, now something else is required that this monetary gain is not addressing or solving.
Totally. I think too, it's a weird parallel because so much of what happens in the show is that people have the capacity to leave with a certain amount of money. And the goalpost is always shifted. But wait, if another 50 people die, then I get this much. And if this happens, then I get this much. Nothing's ever enough because the human mind is always searching for the next thing.
And I wonder if maybe when we're talking about the critique of capitalism, that is another element. When you introduce the human being into the system of capitalism, one of the flaws that shows up is that people will be in this system, but they have the mentality that there is no enough. There is no like people being attached to the idea that research studies show that after $90,000 a year, your happiness dramatically reduces.
Or the increase in money doesn't correlate to an increase in happiness.
There is an exponential drop off in how much happier or more peaceful you feel with more money that you make.
Totally.
And obviously $90,000 being like an American centric metric, whatever that equivalent would be for you in your particular economy. But it's one of those things where the car may not be wrong, but the driver sucks. The car is not interested in going over the speed limit. The car is the car. But if you have a driver behind it that says 100 kilometers is not enough, 150 kilometers is not enough, 200 kilometers is not enough, obviously that is going to end in disaster at some point. It's one of those things I think that people don't account for when they're thinking about fixing systems is you have to fix the hearts of the people who are running the system. Because if people who have this mentality of it's never enough get into power and then start to shape the system, whether explicitly or whether consciously or not, shape the system in the image of their mentality and their worldview, they're going to create a system that begins to lean towards nothing is ever enough. Versus, I wonder what capitalism would be like if there was some sort of like buffering or counterbalance that introduced this idea of what is sufficient and what is enough. And can you do that at a societal level? Or does that have to be done at the level of the individual human heart?
Guys, we hope you're enjoying the episode so far. And if you are, you can check out the full extended director's cut over on our Patreon. This doesn't just give you a full extended director's cut that's much longer than this episode here on YouTube, but it also funds our legal defense fund, which unfortunately we had to use recently. We got a copyright strike against us that forced us actually to hire a lawyer and fight it legally. Thankfully, it went well and we're back in business. But that Patreon support was hugely necessary to keep this channel alive. And so we wanted to say a big thank you to our current Patreon subscribers. And if you guys wanted to continue the fight against excessive copyright claims and strikes, you can check out the link to our Patreon in the description below.
Join us in the resistance against a broken system.
That's so good!
So I loved everything about the way that they set up No-eul's character.
Yes.
Because the entire way along, we've never seen one of the jumpsuit people, how they got there, what's happening for them. We've never seen their backstory. And everything about how her story is set up screams to the audience player.
Yes.
It's like, hey, here's the sob story of like how this happened and why she's here and how she's struggling with things.
You're
and all
gonna
this.
sympathize with her. She's gonna have to go through a difficult situation.
Exactly. And so everything is priming you to be on her side, see her empathically. And then you get to this point where it's like, oh, okay, here's maybe my initial thought with this was like, oh, we saw one way how they get people to the games, but this could easily be another way that they get people to games. All up until here, right? It's like they have the numbers on the door that would make sense, or it's like, oh, this is your player number, whatever the case is. And then they haven't given you any sense that things are going to be different. But then it's this moment, that right there, where you're like, oh, no.
And what a great use of framing where it's like, you cannot see anything except for this little slit where you're getting just like, oh, it's so great.
So this to me, especially with a lot of the ways that people have talked about this trope or concept with other shows that feel like they've done it poorly.
Yes.
This to me feels like a beautifully done example of a subversion of expectations.
Yes.
You have the audience believing one thing is going to happen, and then you flip it on its head and make it something else.
Totally. And I think it's a great example of when do you subvert expectations?
Great point.
A really big, easy example to like throw shade at is like The Last Jedi. Luke Skywalker's actually lost faith in the Jedi and in the Force. And it's just like, it feels like, okay, like you could do that. But to a degree, like this is a way where you can subvert expectations where you're intentionally not falling into the sequel trap of we're just doing the same thing again. It's like, why is this a subversion of expectations? Because you're adding a new layer.
Versus when you give the Luke Skywalker example, it's like, why are we subverting expectations? Because he has to be in the show.
For kicks and giggles?
Yeah, we need to create an excuse for him to be here.
Yeah.
And so this is what we're going to go with.
It's also an example of taking away something or adding something as a subversion of expectations.
Right.
Like, it feels like that's a better way to subvert expectations is by adding rather than subtracting.
And it's an expectation where like the audience doesn't really have a huge attachment to this. Like they don't really care one way or the other.
But they will now.
Yeah, well, or an attachment to, it doesn't matter to them whether or not No-eul is a player or a jumpsuit person.
We still get to see and explore her character.
Yeah, it really does not matter one way or the other. It's not the thing we're going to be attached to. We're still going to be attached to her and like, oh, now what is it like for somebody to be on the other side of this? For somebody to be in this position where they're the guards and they're kind of enforcing the rules. What's the humanity underlying the dehumanization of the jumpsuits and the masks and the uniformity? And we kind of get a peek behind the lens. And so I think you're right. It adds something. It adds the context of the people who we have been rooting against the entire time.
It's cool how, sort of like you were talking about before, where you have the binary choice and then you explore it. You have this very on the surface system. You have players and you have guards, but now we get to explore it.
Yeah.
You had one thing to keep track of before. What are the players doing? And now you're like, oh, what are the players and what are the guards doing? We're expanding the world a little bit, because if you've watched season 1, you've gone through this now and now you're ready. You've almost like leveled up to the point where you're ready to digest both of these things at the same time.
Yeah.
And on a political kind of analysis, it's kind of funny how the person who they get to symbolize the guards is from North Korea. So is that like subtle communism little throw in there? It's like we're critiquing capitalism and we're using somebody from a communist country to kind of display the other side of the coin a little bit.
There's a piece of how they frame this whole thing too before the scene that I love how they set it up, where she's ironically doing a job where she's also behind a mask.
Yeah.
And you can't see anything. And even though it's not totally uniform, it's still like a bunch of people in these big jumpsuits running around, like navigating, except it's the opposite in there. There, it's like caretaking, doing things well, right? Like supporting people, like making people have fun and be happy. Like the non-contrasting version of like kids' games and nursery rhymes and like all the fun stuff. And then also interesting too, how it's another like all animal suits dehumanization. Another piece.
And it's funny how she's wearing a pink suit in both of them.
Yeah. It's these like little lead-ins that you get. Also interesting how she's like in some ways the best person in the mascot group of workers.
Right.
Because she's like taking care of this little girl.
Yeah.
She's like going the extra mile, being really sweet. And there's, I think, a little bit of a foreshadowing about her being very effective at her job. In this context, like she's very effective at her job and taking care of people. There's like this mirroring effect that happens too, where she's also very good at killing people.
Yeah.
Like where she's placing specific shots and she's kind of, you know, trying to make sure that people survive and like in some ways still caretaking, but doing it because she's highly effective at things.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting how getting herself geared up to do this job is by burning the picture child and like that thing that she was doing before, taking care of the child. Now she's kind of letting that go. And you could easily interpret that for a player as somebody who like is needing to let go of their humanity and their attachments in order to do this. But it also works as, well, here's one of the guards who's going to be like needing to totally remove their humanity in order to do the job that they've got to do.
Totally. In an interesting way that also acts as a bit of a foreshadowing, because we see that, oh, we're going to have to see the humanity behind one of the guards.
Yep.
That acts as a piece of foreshadowing of, oh, I'm going to have to see the humanity behind the front man.
Yep.
Where it's like, you're going to see layers coming off of the masks of the people who you were primed to hate from the beginning. And so how much of this at the same time is like a critique of everything that you're talking about before. And also like, as bad as people make decisions, if only you knew the whole story, maybe that would give you some context and not excuse what they did, but help you to understand that if you were in their situation, you might not be so pure.
Yeah, totally. There's another piece too, where there's a nice little lead in kind of in the same idea of her losing her humanity, where after she burns the picture, that she then goes and quits her job. So now she's no longer in the bunny suit. And you see the bunny going back through the carnival or whatever it is, the amusement park.
The theme park, yeah.
Yeah. And it's now not doing the same thing for the kid.
Oh, yeah.
They don't know it's not her. And so there's a way you could read that as like, this is now kind of what she's going to be doing as well. Which is like, and it's part of why I love this framing for No-eul so much, because it's like, so many little pieces and details that to me say like this part of the show was really carefully crafted. It's cool to watch the weaving and the magic of this take place when you pull it all apart.
여러분들이 하실 게임은 가위, 바위보, 하나 빼기입니다.
They could have used ball gags, but they used dog bone toys.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a very interesting touch again in that dehumanization space.
It's so funny too, because it goes with the themes of like what Gi-hun says at the very end. He's like, bark, bark, and wag your tail for your masters, and that whole deal where it's this theme of you're not just an animal, you're a dog. You're like, it's like that. It ties into that dehumanization piece, but it also ties into the specific phraseology that Gi-hun uses later.
Which is great when they're keeping it, the themes and the motifs connected to the same characters.
Yeah, this scene was brutal.
Absolutely.
But I think it was one of my favorite scenes of the entire series.
Oh, lovely. Good. I've learned so much about you now. Explain it.
So the whole starting point is that you have this incredibly tense situation.
Yep.
And you have, like we mentioned before with the music of the merry-go-round, this music that does not fit the situation.
It creates the contrast, which creates the defamiliarization, which creates the tension and the discomfort.
And on top of that, you have some really, really interesting and good pieces of filmmaking, because there's this little escalation that takes place where it's like, we're going to play this game. Here are the rules. Here's the stakes that are at play.
Yep.
We're going to up the ante.
Yep.
It's not just one hands or two hands.
Look at this.
Yeah.
I was shocked at this moment. It's great that it gives you some foreshadowing that the recruiter is going to be willing to pull the trigger at some point.
Yeah.
In the same kind of game with Gi-hun later.
Yeah.
But for me, I was like,
yeah, that's another piece of foreshadowing. It's great.
Yeah.
It's like he does that to start with. He's going to do that at the end.
It was wild to me of like, I need to use this term very carefully because of my profession.
Okay.
But that was the moment to me where I was like, oh, this guy is actually out of his mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I say that like technically, like this guy is disconnected from reality. He is so ingrained in being the dog for the game, I guess you would say. He's so bought into it that the normal human perspective and framework you would have about the world has been completely obliterated, and it is just the framework of the game that is guiding every one of his actions, every one of his thoughts, every one of his beliefs, every one of his feelings.
Totally.
Which then actually makes sense as to why he does the thing at the end with Gi-hun that he does. Like, why does he commit to it so hard? Because he is not a person. He's an avatar of the game.
Ooh, that's a great way to put it.
Gi-hun is actually having a confrontation essentially with the embodiment of the Squid Games itself.
Yeah. What is it? And is it maybe a reflection of what does it do to somebody when they've dehumanized everybody to the maximum extreme?
You can't dehumanize somebody without dehumanizing yourself.
Yeah. You see the people who are dehumanized, and what happens to the people who are doing the dehumanization. They're not exactly getting off scot-free.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a different cost that they have to pay.
가위바위보, 하나 빼기. 가위바위보, 하나 빼기. 가위바위보, 하나 빼기. 가위바위보, 하나 빼기. 가위바위보.
What do you do when you have a lot of information to convey and you want to jump between it quickly? They have a split screen, which is like,
I really like that actually.
it's not a classical cinematic choice. Split screens are very rarely used in cinema because they have a very stylistic look that can detract from the overall message. But
I think the last time that I've seen, or the times that I recall seeing a split screen in other like movies or pieces of media, would be more likely around montages.
Yeah, montages. 500 Days of Summer did this one. His two different possible ways that the situation could go.
Yeah.
It's a great tool.
It's quite niche.
But it's very niche. So what I love is that they're showcasing in that scene, they were using it to showcase multiple pieces of information at the same time. And then right at the moment where you need the biggest piece of information, they choose to withhold it. It's like rock, paper, scissors, go, rock, paper. And then as soon as they land on the final one, you don't know what happens.
So you're building tension.
Exactly. But then this happens. They bring it back. And then which side is the gun on? He's the one who lost the
game. Right, that's right.
But this guy then sacrifices himself.
That's right.
So what you have is that subtle little reveal where it's like we're going to pull back a split screen and reveal which side the gun is on, is which person lost the game.
And the way that the recruiter's looking too is on that side.
Yeah. Again, tying in with the themes of maybe one of the solutions that the filmmakers are putting forward is what's the solution to whatever system you're in. It's the human heart. It's like the condition of the humans who are involved in the situation are actually the antidote to the problem. Self-sacrifice, the person who's thinking about other people rather than himself. It's not me winning. It's this idea of retaining it's tough because it's retaining your human, refusing to dehumanize somebody else comes at the cost of his life.
Well, the question is there really a difference? What is a life if you are no longer a human? Cheesy can I get?
Yeah.
But it really is like, it's true. And there's something about like, that is the antidote. What is worth more? And I think it's the valuing of something outside of yourself. Because when we're talking about all the economic stuff before, it's like fundamentally, what is money about? It's fundamentally about survival. It's that vehicle and method that helps you take care of yourself, essentially. Do I have enough to survive? Do I have enough to make ends meet? And then you look here, well, what is the sacrifice doing? It's saying that I'm prioritizing something else above my survival.
That's a good point.
Right? Because that's what he loses. But he says it's worth it because this is a young man who I am responsible for, who I care about, who has a whole future. Am I willing to make the sacrifice for something else rather than for myself?
My goodness.
So there's another piece where I don't know how you felt about it. How did you feel about the fact he lost because he didn't do anything differently? Like it wasn't an action, it was inaction that made him lose. Because I have thoughts about that from my initial interpretation.
I really like that, maybe for a different reason. I think it's great because it does two things simultaneously. One, it sets up or I guess we saw this in season 1, but it reiterates this in season 2, that a decision not to participate is still a decision and costs you your life.
Ooh, okay. I like that. And I like that interpretation.
But at the same time, a refusal to participate is also the only way out.
Yeah.
And so it's doing both of those things at the same time. You cannot, once you're in the Squid Game, you cannot just decide not to play anymore. You'll die.
Right.
But at the same time, that's also the solution, is not to participate in the flawed system.
Yeah. Oh, very nicely put. I like that. And when you explain that, I actually really like that interpretation. It's another layer that I like about this.
And I love how the fact that it's like, that's hidden in the decision of an otherwise great scene on its own. It's like, it's just that little cherry on top. It's like, this is a great scene. It's amazing. It builds tension. It tells the story. And on top of that, it's telling you the central core themes that are going to be explored all throughout the rest of the series.
Structure, emotion, and meaning.
Yes.
All wrapped together in one scene. Initially, when I watched this, I didn't like that part of the scene.
Why?
Because I felt like him being there, having these two things, my framing of it was he has a choice.
Yes.
He has a choice to either pull one away that makes him win or pull another one away to make him lose. And to me, it felt like it would have been it would have framed it more as a noble sacrifice if he had made a choice to pull one away where he would have then lost.
I see what your interpretation is.
Yeah.
It's like, on the one hand, it's like you're making an active decision.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose to win at your expense, or I'm going to choose to lose at your expense.
Yeah.
I think that would have been stronger if the central theme wasn't escaping the system.
Yes.
Because now the decision is, I don't want to play anymore.
Yeah. I'm not even going to play by the rules of your game. Okay.
Yeah.
So from a character perspective, then I still don't like it. Because it's like, I want the noble
scene in isolation.
I want the noble sacrifice. But there's another part where I think the cultural lens piece still stands, where even just having me sit back and think about it is useful to kind of remember that you don't have all the context for the specific Korean cultural elements of the show. And some of the things that might be unexplained, or like, that's weird, why is that happening, it's good to look at it through that lens and think, is there something here that maybe I don't understand because somebody's coming at it from a different cultural perspective than me? The scene that I was watching somebody talk about that framed it for me this way, made me rethink about this scene, was when they all get the food in season 2 And then they all also get the forks where they can start then killing each other. And the framing from somebody who is Korean and lives in Korea saying, that's ridiculous because we would never use forks for that food. So like if you're a Korean person, there is no other way to look at that scene. Like the fork is not actually a utensil for the food. The fork is only a weapon.
Yeah.
And it's only in like the most surface level guys a utensil for the food. And so I also wonder how many different parts in this show, if you were a Korean person, would read differently in some of these scenes, like little elements that you would get of like, see the fork. I wouldn't be like, oh, well, I guess they're kind of going to use that as a weapon. They'd be like, oh, this is so out of place. And how that would kind of give you a different viewing experience.
Gosh, maybe we should do that for season 3. Have somebody who's actually invite somebody on who's from a Korean background, grew up in Korea.
Yep. Got to talk to our Korean friends and be like, okay, who wants to come on the podcast?
So I think those are great points. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the reasons that I find it to be a very strong finish is because the way that the game started is that he didn't understand the rules. He didn't pull one back. And so he was disqualified from the round.
Oh, it also is.
It
it's
ends
a
the way that it
bookending.
starts. Yeah, they bookended it.
Oh, this is okay. I am having less and less justification to not like that decision. Crap.
You're wrong. All interpretations are valid except for yours.
No. It's funny though, because there's like, I don't know. I was watching reviews of this and I was watching people talk about how like, oh, I didn't like the scene at the end with the guns because I don't like scenes with guns. It's like, is that a critique of the show or is that just your personal preference?
That's a critique of guns.
I want to know, but yeah, I want a noble sacrifice here. Well, Curtis, is that actually what the scene needs? Or is this just like you want the noble heroic sacrifice because it's like what you like to see in shows?
This actor from Squid Games has a talent that no other actor in the world has, and it's kind of insane. Now, in the beginning of the season, the recruiter and Gi-hun play Russian roulette. And this is the face that the recruiter gives Gi-hun while playing. What do you notice? Well, even though it's the same frame, half of his face shows that he's cocky and confident that he's gonna win, all while the other side of his face is terrified that he's gonna lose the game and will lose his life.
I was having a hard time listening to this because I now know what TikTok accent is.
It's a thing. It's true.
When you think about this, what do you think? I can't even do it. And apologies to the guy. It's just
I need to hook the viewer within the first 2 seconds. Retention is key.
Talk about systems of oppression. TikTok. Oh my goodness.
There might be nothing to that apart from the fact that I think that's a cool thing. It adds character and it's something that just flies under the surface, but it's also adding to this constant thing of binary opposites. It's like on his face, it was red and blue. It's confident and afraid. The decisions that people had to choose were like stay in the game or leave the game, and they were color contrasted. I don't know if it was in season 1 or season 2, but it was red and blue. It was this versus that.
Lots of that's fascinating for a couple of reasons. It's like it's this. You're right. It's a binary. It's this black and white thinking because of the contrast, but it's also this all or nothing.
Yes. Which
is fascinating for me because that's one of the primary cognitive distortions that we see that creates psychological distress for people.
Tell
and
me
it's
more.
It's the idea of seeing the world in black and white, seeing the world as either this or that without any of the gray or the moderate in the middle. You see two choices rather than you have an infinite amount of choices and you can customize them all. But it's this arbitrariness to life based on whatever the rules are that you are holding on to in your mind. And it makes me think about, of course, in a system that dehumanizes and breaks people, there is going to be an all or nothing choice. And it also leans in so much to that theme about how much is enough. It's either all or it's nothing.
That's a good point. I think the piece that I got from it was kind of tying into this illusion of choice.
Yeah.
The idea that you have two options, and depending on what side you're on, the other side's choice looks crazy to you.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Like, we're gonna die if we go back out in the real world. We need the money. We're as good as dead anyways. We need to be here. Versus like, we can escape with our lives. Get a grip. And so to me, that kind of seemed like such an interesting analogy to the political system, or at least In Canada, we got more than 2 parties.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're gonna piss off some people in the States right now.
Yeah. Regardless of if you're left or right, we're going to do our best to make you as furious as possible.
I 100% agree with you though, because it's this idea of like, and maybe in a way, kind of when things are framed in a system by people who currently possess power in the system, it's like, how much is that all or nothing, black or white choice kind of arbitrary and never really going to get you what you need? Like, what are you going to pick? Are you going to pick Democrat or are you going to pick Republican? But no matter what choice you pick, you don't get to pick anything that is not some sort of oligarchical family.
Yeah. You get the extremes of one or the extremes of other.
Yep. But at the end of the day, they're all kind of the same. It's like, do you want to pick from this elite asshole or this elite asshole?
Yeah.
And versus like, what if there was somebody who I felt like was a better representation of character and competency for the entire country? There's like 350 or 400 million people in this country.
The States, not Canada.
Surely it can't come down to this unlikable person or this unlikable person.
Yeah.
Can it?
Yeah.
But I guess it can.
Well, that's the interesting thing where it's like when you reduce it down to the most basic and extreme of both versions, what insane thing are you able to get people to vote for?
Yeah.
It's like both of those
yes.
choices are
Yes.
extreme and crazy from people on the other side, but they still get equally as many votes. It's very tough.
Yeah.
And everybody on the other side is like, that's insane. Like, how are people willing to vote this way?
Yeah. It's, I think maybe that's a good way to frame it. When you put forward an arbitrary, extremely binary set of choices in front of people and play to their needs, their fears, and kind of stoke those fires, how outlandish of an action can you get people to do? Whether it's what you vote for or what you are willing to do in a game. Boy, we're going to lose some subscribers.
Our main demographic in terms of total number of viewers is American.
Yep.
That's not going to be the case after this, probably.
There's another interesting thing too, though, because when you're talking about that, it makes me think about the ridiculousness of what you're able to get somebody to do when you present this binary choice. There's the use of kids' games that feels to me like a direct critique of the games that we play in capitalism to make money. For a lot of them, they are kind of ridiculous and they're kind of nonsensical and they kind of don't matter at the end of the day or don't possess any inherent meaning. Even the architecture in the Squid Games is like all the stairs and the hallways is so MC Escher.
Yes.
And there's something that I think really gives it this sense of when you're watching all the contestants be moved through it and you see them like moving in opposite directions oftentimes. Like you'll see the characters who are going up the staircase, but then in the background, you see characters who are moving down another staircase. And it really, I think, lends to this idea of the cyclical pointlessness of what they're doing. It's like an MC Escher drawing where you see, if you tracked the actual pathway of the staircases, they all loop back in on each other. They don't go anywhere. They don't do anything. It's not for a purpose or a function.
Right.
And I think that as well kind of lends itself to this sense or atmosphere you get in the space of all of this risk is so pointless.
Yeah. The specific phrase that came to mind when I saw it, and as you're describing it, is that everybody's striving for upward mobility and it doesn't make sense.
Right. My theory going into this is part of the pointlessness about the games is that people are trying to solve their problem with the same mentality that got them into the problem in the first place.
That's a great point. Sort of like at the very first episode of season 1, Gi-hun is trying to fix his money problems by gambling. That's what got him to trouble in the first place.
And what is everybody doing as they start moving? These games are essentially a gamble.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And it's something where people are on this hope of like, oh yeah, I'll survive and I do this, but they have no idea what the games are going to be. They don't know if they actually have an advantage in any of this stuff. And it's just kind of this like throwing things on a wing and a prayer to see what happens out of desperation. That's what got them in. And even when we're looking at like what keeps people in the games, why the system can actually reliably have people come back in, why in the first season, why 93% of people came back to the games is because their mentality didn't change. And it's this thing where they keep pushing the envelope. I need more. I'm going to do more of the same thing, hoping that it's going to make things change. But it's like, it's the reason that you got into debt in the first place. You gambled it away, or you made a poor decision, or you went all in on something that was a bad idea. And now you're going to continue to do that in the Squid Games. People aren't stepping back to look at it. I kind of thought about this when I was thinking of when people should get out. In a lot of ways, it's a great demonstration of the sunk cost fallacy. Like, I've already risked my life once, and it's just for this. I've already kind of invested myself emotionally in this. I got to now push for a little bit more, And I wonder how much, if people aren't willing to make a sacrifice of what they have already done, like let go of the sunk costs, that's the anchor that's going to drag them to the bottom of the ocean. But they're going to hang on to it because, like, I can't let go. Sometimes you got to let go.
It's weird. It's like, I've never gambled before.
Didn't you say that you just gambled recently the other weekend?
That's what I'm getting at.
Oh, yeah. It's like, we talked about this last weekend. It's a bald-faced lie.
Yeah. No, I've never actually gambled in a casino before. And went to a bachelor party a couple weekends ago, and it was like, oh, like, whatever. If I lose like $20 at the blackjack table, whatever. It's like, it's all good. And I found myself up about $70.
Yeah.
And I found it so difficult to walk away.
Yeah.
It was eerie, the tentacles and the grasp that this just a little bit more has for you.
Ooh.
It's like, it's really easy to say when you're outside of the scenario. It's really easy to say. It's like, oh, just like, you're up, like, just take it away and go. It's like, but your mind is, I don't know what it is. Like, the fact that you've experienced this much opens your mind up to the fact, well, what about more? What about even more? Like, I've never actually experienced that level of, like, I can understand a gambler's mindset now, why people get addicted to gambling. Before that, I couldn't understand. I'm like, that's stupid. And now I'm like, oh, I get it. It actually is really tough.
Even if you don't have any like pain or distress that you're coping with, the tentacle feeling still exists in there. Like,
it pulls you back.
Yeah, like, I don't have anything that this can get a grip in, and yet I still feel it grabbing at me.
Yeah.
So if somebody had something where they could like give that gambling a handle, of course it's gonna pull them in.
Totally.
Which then again is a great, I think, analogy for the rigged game a little bit, or the stacked advantage, the house always wins. It's like, yeah, the games might be fair and above board, but you also have the casinos who have spent hundreds of millions of billions of dollars in researching human psychology to understand what gets a player to stick in there.
Yeah.
So is it really fair? Is there really consent?
Even just the noise that the money going into the piggy bank.
I was going to say,
it's so reminiscent of a casino.
Can you imagine the appeal of a slot machine that made no noise, had no visuals, and was just three things where it's like chunk, chunk, chunk?
Yeah, it's boring.
And especially if the payout did not have some sort of like audio cue to it.
Some celebratory you win cue.
Like, they velvet coat the inside where the coins come out of, so it's just like this thud rather than the clanking of the coins. It's just like, like, that's so unsatisfying. I wonder how much people would be willing to play, which then again makes me think, well, is the answer obvious to how do you stop a gambling addiction? You make these things less appealing. But then if that's such an obvious answer, you have to think that somebody much smarter than me who's already researched this stuff has come to that conclusion. So why hasn't anybody done it? Why hasn't it been legislated? Why is it the same all the way around the world? I feel like because somewhere at some point of the system, somebody who is in a position of power has advantage or gets something out of this being there and almost acts like that buffer to stop the change from occurring that is better for humanity, but worse from that economic lens.
그 비행기를 타. 그게 당신한테 좋을 거야.
I didn't understand at first why Gi-hun goes back. To me, there's a little bit of a strange piece where it's like, that's like, you have the money, you can go see your, like, what are you doing? Like, why go back? Where does this sense of justice and indignance and like, I'm going to take down the system? It's like, part of me wonders if the reason that he actually made that decision is only because he saw the old man player 001 in his state at the very end, where it's like he had everything and the way he died was like he has nothing to show for it. There's nobody around him. Like he had all the money and power and whatever, and he's like dying in this lonely room.
An empty room.
Yeah, and it's meaningless. And so part of me wonders, like, if Gi-hun didn't experience that, would he have actually turned back? Because is that decision to turn back like, I'm going to fix the system, or is it like, I've lost everything anyways? Why in the world would you have won that many millions of dollars in equivalent money? Why would you risk it all again? It's like, because I literally have nothing to lose. It's like, my mom's gone, my estranged wife and daughter. It's like I have nothing. So I might as well go down swinging.
Yeah. Yeah. Potentially that. I think there's also a piece maybe where it's like kind of contrasting with the very opening of the show. Maybe he's found something that makes him feel alive again.
Ooh.
Maybe he's finally motivated because he is fueled by this experience and sense of purpose. I now have something to do that feels transcendently meaningful. I could just live up my life and like do whatever with this money and forget this out, or I could hopefully make a dramatic improvement for humanity by eliminating this game from existence. I can change the system in a way where it makes things better for other people. And I think it's pointed that in that last scene where Il-nam dies, that it's that moment where he sees somebody helping the homeless guy.
Ooh, good point.
It's
Very
that
good
like,
point.
oh, here's what I can do. And it's that like, because Il-nam's whole bet is like, oh, like I'll die or I'll take everything from you. And it's that moment of, oh, here's now something that is more valuable than whatever the financial gain or money that I could have. Is like, it's the helping people. It's this action. I actually had a conversation with a friend about this recently. And I think when we think about the meaning of life and purpose and all that stuff, I think there's a lot less purpose and meaning to life in having than there is in doing.
Ooh, that's a good phrase.
It's like, it is not what makes my life meaningful is not what I have. What makes life meaningful is what I do.
Yeah.
The actions that I take. I feel like human beings are such agency-based individual beings. And maybe that's true for all human beings. And maybe it's true for all life. Because everything else, animals, plants, all the rest of it, doesn't have anything to possess. It just has actions to take.
Yeah.
And maybe we are the deviant things in nature who can possess and take things. And maybe that is what actually gets us all twisted up. Versus if we can reattach to, my life is for something purposeful and meaningful. And for us as human beings, it seems like making things better and improving things.
Kind of makes sense then, going back to the thing you talked about, billionaires being really depressed after they stop playing their game.
Yeah.
So is that the interesting parallel to Gi-hun, where it's like, is that him selling his $500 million company? It's like, I need to go make another one, because this is actually the thing that like I feel purpose in building something. I don't feel purpose in having this money. Yeah. It's like, it's meaningless.
Did you, speaking of the scene, did you like the religious symbolism that was going on in the scene?
Enlighten me.
Il-nam kind of being like the god of the whole world and the games. And in Squid Games, they play 6 games over 6 days, and how he asks Gi-hun to come meet him on the 7th story of the building. Not the 7th, not the 77th story, the 100th story, where it's at the top, but like at the 7th story, and that they're meeting on Christmas Eve, and that the final game that they play, which is the 7th game, takes place and goes to midnight, which would be then Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And then it's almost the rebirth of the savior of the games in Gi-hun. Like,
boy.
you know, it almost seems like maybe the creator was kind of like leaning into some of these analogy pieces, or possibly.
Perhaps. You know what? I didn't catch that, but that's really poignant. Gosh, I love it when there's so many little tidbits that you can dig out, and
It's
they actually
super cool,
and
eh?
they actually build towards greater meaning within the story.
Totally.
I would love to do some predictions for what you think is going to happen in season 3.
Totally.
There's a lot of cliffhangers and things that we see are being left sort of in limbo. What do you think is going to happen?
So I think there's some obvious ones. I think Frontman is going to die.
Okay.
The only question is who's going to kill him. Is it going to be Gi-hun? Is it going to be his brother?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I don't know. So that's kind of like an obvious one. I feel like something that I've heard going around, I'm curious about, like, is Gi-hun going to survive? Is he going to successfully destroy the games, or is he going to become the new frontman?
Yeah, there's something where he's going to take a very stark position. He's either going to become the thing that he hates, or he's going to successfully carry out his mission, or he's going to die in the process.
I have a really hard time believing that he's going to become the frontman. It seems like that would be so antithetical to everything the show has been moving towards the entire time. That feels like if Gi-hun became the frontman, it would be an example of a bad subversion of expectations.
Where it doesn't complete the themes, or at least if that does happen, there's got to be a lot of legwork done in this 3rd season.
Yeah.
To actually make us see that transformation has happened.
As it currently stands, my feeling is it would be very narratively unsatisfactory. Another thing to think about.
Yeah.
Do you think dad of the girl who has cancer is actually dead, or did he maybe survive?
I think he survived.
Because No-eul kind of maybe, again, framing from the beginning of season 2, made a shot that didn't actually kill somebody. Yeah. Is that now kind of being reframed? The more that I think about it, the more I actually like that.
I think I agree with that 100%. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. Going back to the Gi-hun's culmination piece, I have a very specific prediction because there's some pieces of information that I have that I'm not sure if you've seen yet.
Okay.
So I think that Gi-hun is going to, whether or not he successfully tears down the Squid Games, he's going to more or less look like he achieves his mission.
Okay.
And then he's going to come to the realization that the Squid Games are happening globally, not just in Korea.
Yeah. That makes sense. I get that when in the first season they talk about like, oh, the Korean games are great. Like, yeah, he's going to get to that sense of, oh, I've dismantled this system.
Yeah.
But there are more things to be dismantled.
Totally. The other piece that I'm pretty confident about this reason is because they've not announced it, but there is talk within the industry that they're going to be doing a Western version of Squid Game.
Yeah, because this is a relatively complete story, but it's also a money-making endeavor.
Yeah.
And so I think they probably don't want to kill off this IP.
Yeah.
Which is ironic about an anti-capitalist story, isn't
like,
it?
let's turn this baby until there's no more money coming out of it.
Let's remove all the humanity and meaning and just make this a product.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I had an interesting arc for my own personal experience with this. I'm wondering what you think about this, because my initial reaction was, oh no, why are you doing this to Squid Game? It doesn't need another spiritual successor, or it doesn't need an adaptation. It doesn't need that. Like, I hate this. And then I heard that it was going to be directed by David Fincher. And I was like, oh, maybe.
You've got my attention now.
Yeah.
The tentacles have now pulled me back in.
I could get on board with this. For those of you who don't know.
Just a little more Squid Game. It's fine.
For those of you who don't know, David Fincher was the director of Fight Club, the director of Seven, the director of Gone Girl, the director of The Social Network.
So many good movies.
This is a person who's incredibly good at action films where the interesting thing is the story.
Yeah.
And so I think he would be an incredible choice. And I want to see a David Fincher Squid Game series.
Yeah.
Whatever they choose to do, I want to see that. At the same time, I feel like, ooh, this is unnecessary and I don't like it. So I'm torn. A little bit of both.
What are you going to let win?
Yeah.
Your anti-capitalist purpose and meaning, or your capitalist enjoyment and entertainment?
I wonder if we've seen the slow little buildup of seeing behind the masks of people and getting a little bit more of in touch with the humanity of people that we don't like. I'm wondering if we saw that with the guards, we saw that with the front man. I'm wondering if we're going to see that with the elites who are wearing the golden masks, where we get a little bit of behind the scenes of like, oh, these gross people, they've got a little bit of humanity too. And it's going to make them feel a little bit grosser because you see truly how someone real could get to that position.
Maybe like quite a contrast from how they were presented in season 1, where they were quite caricature-y.
Yeah. This whole film is a caricature. People are wearing masks with shapes on them and symbols, and there's caricatures galore.
Yeah.
but then you see you peel back the layers and there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. I wonder if we're going to see that with them as well.
Possible. Is it possible that Gi-hun will convince the front man to switch sides through the power of friendship? Do you think that fits at all with the themes that we're seeing here? I think it'd be funny. I don't know if I have a whole lot of hope for that.
I might. It could be. I would love for that. That'd be great. If it was non-cheesy, I'm all on board. I don't think that's going to happen. I wonder. Here's the thing that I think might happen. If we're tying this into the Russian roulette way, the scene that we broke down with Russian roulette, are we going to see the front man sacrifice him for Gi-hun so that Gi-hun can actually carry out the mission? Does he convert him through the power of friendship? And then does the front man have to sacrifice him so that Gi-hun can actually go on and eliminate the games?
Yeah, possible.
I would love that.
It'd be interesting. I feel like regardless, at some point, I think between Gi-hun and the front man, there will be some sort of appeal to whatever humanity is left.
Yeah.
Whether it turns out or not, I don't know.
I wonder if they're going to play on the idea that maybe the elites are kind of us at the same time. The people who are gawking at them playing the games is actually the audience. Because did you catch that one scene where they say like, oh, where are the elites? Oh, they're up there. And then they all turn and look and they're looking directly at the camera.
이 게임을 만든 놈들. 그리고 우리가 이 게임을 하는 걸 지켜보는 놈들. 그놈들이 어디 있는데요? 저 위.
Looking at the audience, the people who are watching us play these games for their entertainment.
It's
like, that's us.
Yeah. I think if they did a little bit more like that, that would be highly invited to get people to be a little bit more introspective of like, I'm always a fan of people being forced uncomfortably into a little bit more reflection about their media consumption and viewing habits and what roles they play in some of this stuff. So I would be fascinated by that.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to think about like a very gory, disgusting show being like, why are you watching this gory, disgusting stuff for your entertainment?
Yeah, presenting someone with a show and then kind of confronting them, be like, why are you watching this? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. The fact that you like this says something about the world that we live in.
I honestly, that is a beautiful idea. I would love to see a show do that at some point. Like,
we might be able to see a show do that at some point.
Squid Game, please break the fourth wall and confront people about their view. Oh, that'd be so much fun.
But with that out of the way, guys, we kind of have to call it there. We got a lot of thoughts and opinions that we haven't shared yet. But if you guys have any other predictions that you think that we missed or that you think it's going to happen, that you're like, oh, you totally missed this, please write it down in the comments. This is not a show just where we talk. This is a show where everybody talks. Write down in the comments, what do you think? What did we get right? What did we get wrong? Where do you agree? Where do you disagree?
Yeah, there was lots of things that we left out too. Like I would have loved to have talked more about the side characters and kind of where they talk about the outsiders in Korean society. And I feel like if you guys want to talk about that or other things in our season 3 review that we'll probably be doing, like let us know, give us those topics of the things that you want to see. And we would love to dive into those and sink our teeth in.
Thanks for joining us and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.